Can you hear me?
As much as I
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah. I hear a whole lot of other stuff too.
Fans and dogs walking.
Yeah. Alright. We're live.
Oh, we are. Well, skipped a couple weeks, guys. We had some things come up. One was Christina wasn't feeling well, and we had another one. What was the other? Oh, well, the holiday. Every now and then she gets a headache that makes her where she can't even do anything but lay down. Gets sick, all those things. But she's had, that's usually from changing weather. What I thought I would talk about today, which is the best I can tell, the 22nd time that I have done a live stream. What I thought we'd talk about today is getting ready to move your mobile home, what you need to do. Before I do, my wife said that someone emailed about talking about putting a metal roof on a camper. All right. That entails some issues that you have to deal with. Okay. So if you're talking about a metal roof, first of all, are you talking about the kind of metal roof that we put on buildings and do on top of houses and that kind of thing with the ribs on it? Understanding the ribs causes that to not have, although it gives it strength, it causes it to not have a flat surface. And a lot of there's places on that camper that are affected by that. So where would that be? Like the roof mount air needs a curb to sit flat. Does it have to be, can you not use it? Yes, you can use that, but you're going to have to build that up so that that 3/4 inch rib is now flat with a curb that's going around it. Does that make sense?
They also asked what you would do gauge-wise. Would there be any difference in the gauge of the metal that you use?
Well, first of all, I don't do metal roof on a camper very often. Seems like I've done it once or twice. But that was when they did not have a vent going through the roof, and they did not have roof mount air. Okay? So those vents and the roof mount air and things like that, they're square also, and you would have to build a curb for that. You wouldn't want to run the metal up to it and then rely on your sealant to do that. But now to seal it from getting leaks. So I'm trying to understand why you're wanting to do a metal roof. I mean, it's longer lasting, but generally you're not going to be able to move it down the road very easily unless you really screw it down good. But if it's in a permanent place, I understand why you would. But again, you would want to build curbs not where the roof jacks are, because you can get a rubber roof jack from your metal building supply that will mold over the ribs, and then you can seal that. So that gives you that redundancy, that shaped seal. But so you don't have to worry about the roof vents. You would have to worry about the antenna if it has to go through, but most of the time people get rid of that antenna and go on to other things, than a crank up antenna that ends up breaking. So those two things, the roof mount air and the vents going through the roof, you'd have to build a curb that's as high, or an area that's flat that's as high as the 3/4 ribs all the way around. But I don't really, you don't have to do that. You can buy a rubber sheet, and you can take off there's actually pieces of metal all the way around that outside edge that has screws under it. Now I know that we're getting into a journey, but you can do that. It's much less. It's more complex and it requires some skill. So that pieces on the outside that hold that rubber roof on, you don't see any screws because there's a double-edged piece of rubber that's made to be folded over and then into the little grooves that you literally push it in with a screwdriver or something similar to that to get it sticking into that groove, and then that covers up the screws that actually hold everything down. And then they'll put a sealant all the way around on the edges on the top side so the water runs off and then doesn't go down in behind it where those screws are. But if you're having issues with the roof already rotted because we didn't get to it quick enough, I understand why you'd want to put a metal roof. So if the plywood up there is not holding up well, you might want to strip it. Again, we're building up with 1-bys or such, and you're going to have to build a curb for your roof mount air if you have roof mount air. Or you're going to have to put a curb for your vents if you still have your vents that crank up to let fresh air in. If you don't, then you don't have to worry about it. You can just you fasten it with screws and do really well on the outside edges because that's where the wind's going to cause the most grief. And if you want to keep it tight and not let wind get underneath it, then you would do what they call a residential drip edge that they make at Metal Building Supplies. It's like a drip edge with the piece out, but it goes over about 3 inches and it comes down about 1.5 inches and does that. So what that would do is close up that gap that you might have all the way around. Again, you would screw it down and then you put your metal on it. And you don't have to go right up to past the edge of that drip edge. You can go just behind it. And if you're just not quite square with that camper, it will forgive you because nobody's ever going to see that. But you will have a squared edge instead of a rounded edge like most campers have. So you can do that. You're going to end up building up if you have a roof mount air or that vent. And you'll have to have longer bolts. But it all can be done. And that's doesn't require as much skill as doing the rubber roof. At some point, I'll have to do a job replacing the rubber roof on a camper or motorhome, which I have done many times. So I will discuss that at some point. If you notice the funny hat, that's because I'm at this shop that it's more like a toy store or Narnia's closet, and I can be just as goofy as all get out, and I do everything to be self-deprecating and not proud. And I think that's why my female companion likes me, because I'm willing to be less than always right or just so. And I'm well aware of all my imperfections, so you guys get to see that too. So if you have any more questions about that, you be sure to get in touch with us, particularly during a live stream, because then I'll address it. But in the meantime, a lot of times the reason that mobile homes are there is because they have the ability to be moved to a place that's more advantageous than where they were. So even if they were brand new, you can't live on the mobile home dealer's lot.
Hitting the table.
Oh, I gotta quit doing that. Quit touching the table, she's telling me. Okay. So, you're gonna want it to move to wherever it is, whether it's to your home place or a piece of land that you've purchased or improved, and that's the reason that home is called a mobile home. And believe it or not, there's a lot of design to go down the road without tearing it all up. It's not all just thrown together. Believe me, it feels like it, it looks like it. But those things are pretty capable of going through ravines and dragging on the backside and sliding around. You know, he's like, man, that's not going to hold up. Sometimes it doesn't. The frame is flexible because that's what they want it to be. The house is flexible because they need it to be. If it was all drywall finished, sometimes that drywall finishing has a lot of cracks in it, which some of the newer ones do have that. So it's made to go down the road bouncing around 70 miles an hour, wind blowing at it, all that stuff. So what we're going to talk about today is what do you need to do to get ready to move your mobile home. Say you purchased it and you want to move it to where you want it, you feel more comfortable, or maybe it's just a better opportunity. You got a job, guess what, you can move your home. You don't have to sell it, you can move your home. So let's talk about that. The most important thing I want to talk to you about is the fact that you cannot leave a whole lot of furniture in that home and expect your odds to be with you. So why? Well, to begin with, sometimes those homes by themselves weigh 35,000, and if they're masonite sided, something like that, they can weigh up to 40,000 pounds, which is the maximum ability of that single wide or that double wide mobile home to survive when it was new. Okay, it actually has it has the original stamps on it. It literally tells you the gross vehicle weight of it. And
we're talking about moving a used mobile home, right?
Used mobile home, one that's been lived in. And a secondary move, if you want to go by what movers call it, not a new move, but a secondary move. And that is, if you purchased from somebody else or if you had it yourself, you have to be concerned about its survival getting to the other place. So one of the things you would do is not leave all your things in it. You're thinking, well, I can leave all my stuff in it. Well, that adds maybe 10,000 pounds of weight of things in it.
Momentum equals mass times velocity.
Somebody said that.
Yeah, Duracell.
I promise you, a lot of movers will not move that house with a whole lot of furniture and things in it. You're just trying to save money by not having to, or an effort, not having to rent a place to store it until that thing gets moved and all set up. Okay, but in the middle of it all, you're rolling the dice of whether or not that mobile home will move. And I promise you, there is very good odds that that house will try to come apart because it had too much weight in it. Blow tires, burn bearings, well, you know.
Duracell 8's saying hard to slow down. It's hard to slow that down.
That's where the driver has to pick and choose. You know, I had somebody that I try to be respectful to. He had a single wide mobile home and it had a masonite siding. It was in great shape, which we'll talk about whether or not that's important. But he wanted to move it down to the lower part of his property. He said, do you know anybody that would move it for me, you know, a mover? Because I actually have a diesel, Detroit diesel mobile home mover with a 6-way hitch on it. So it goes up, down, side to side, in and out. And hint, hint, maybe I would want to do it. I was like, no. Once you start going down that hill, that the brakes, the tires of that mover will not function. You're going to have to hire somebody with a dozer that's willing to take a risk. And I don't know anybody. You could get a D8 maybe and try to hook on to it, and maybe it will survive. They end up building a road and come down at an angle to get down below there. He didn't get to go straight down with no big deal. You know, but people tend to come to me and say, well, can't find anybody to do it. I'll ask Phil, maybe he'll do it. And I have done some pretty loopy things. But I haven't had any true tragedies. I've not had a claim on insurance, and I hope I don't. So, yes, weight has a lot to do with stopping. and going up a steep hill and going through wet terrain. So one of the things that happens with movers is they will say, okay, we're going to try to get here on Wednesday. But then they call up and say, well, we had a lot of problems over here. The house got stuck, or it rained. And whenever it rains, you can be assured they're not going to move for at least one day. And that's on their whole schedule. Say you're one of 10 houses that got to move. If it rains and those houses are not straight up pavement to pavement and right into a concrete lot, they're not going to want to move that house. Okay? They're not going to want to move it because as soon as that house gets on wet ground, it will drop. It will do that anyway in a field that hasn't been improved or packed down. They'll have to put down boards. They can have lots of problems that push their schedule. So you hope that they do what they hope to do. They're usually optimistic. Well, I'd like to say you're going to have to read all those little things that say could be, should be, maybe. The reason they're saying those things is all kinds of bad things can happen. Like the vehicle can break down, somebody can get hurt and shut down, the axles can burn up on that mobile home, the tires can go out one after another. You can accidentally do damage to that mobile home against another vehicle or on it. I remember one that went over the guardrail and just tore out all the bottom of the floor joists on one side, trying not to hit a car on this side, which that car was trying to be flagged down by the guy who was ahead of him, saying don't do it, and he radioed back, but it was, where was that mover going to go with a 80-foot home? Well, and this was a 70-something foot home. He just tore 3/4 of the joist out and then pulled it up to the top of the hill and pulled over and said, hey, are we going to be able to make it? Because that ridge beam on the outside, which is the 2x6 that holds all the floor joists together, is exceptionally important to that house being able to go down the road. And you're like, man, that don't make any sense. Seems like it would be the frame. But it's not. It's not just the frame. Frame is important. Frame holds it all together. But that frame is not as stiff as an I-beam on a building, like a high-rise building. It's just not. It's 14 inches, anywhere from 12 to 14 inches high. It will bend, but you want it to. Remember I was telling you, you want it to be able to go down through a ravine, drag back here, and not just totally lift the whole home up and start tearing things up. You want it to be flexible. Now that doesn't make a lot of sense until you start seeing a house go down the road. All right, so
What was that?
the koala bear was underneath the chair and I moved. So let's talk about the ridge beam, which is the 2x6 that holds all the floor joists. If that ridge beam is rotted, whenever they get ready to pull the blocks out, then they can usually tell you if it's not, they don't think it'll make it very well. And they'll start saying, well, I'm not going to be able to insure this because you have this problem and that problem. So how would it be rotted? So if you had masonite and you didn't maintain that masonite, looks like plywood, but it's not. It's like layered paper. If you didn't maintain that, and this might be something you might look into before you buy it, and that bottom part is all rotted, that's because it soaked water, went down to the bottom of that siding, and then soaked up right there. And where is that? That's right on that ridge beam. And that ridge beam ends up being rotted and soft and falling apart. Now, what happens when that does? It will be particularly twisty and will do a lot of this. Even though there's a frame here in the center, about 8 foot apart, 3 foot from each side, there's a high risk that that back portion could slide off. Well, let's say somebody had a back door in the middle of the house or a washing room at the middle of the house, and the outside wall and the floor there all got rotted out. This is what will happen. Going down the road, that mobile home will bounce and do this, and because it's doing so much, that roof, which is not made to handle that much movement, that roof, that metal rolled roofing that's up there, and believe it or not, it is rolled roofing, will split in two, and you'll end up with this terrible mess. And maybe they can get it in, maybe they can't. Sometimes it just makes the whole house start coming apart. I have been called or talked to people who have slid off the back 15 feet off the frame because it was that rotted. And that's a mover's nightmare. That's not what they want to do. They'll try to pull over before that kind of drops into the, before they rub it up against the tree and drop it off. And all that stuff causes powerful lot of damage on the inside. Can it be fixed? Yes. But why don't we just avoid all those things? So if you have a rotted ridge beam, which is that 2x6 that runs along those floor joists, you need to fix it. That's a lot of work, but you need to do it. Okay? You need to do it. So check that out before you get ready to go. Don't leave too much furniture. That's what we talked about. All right. You realize that the mover generally will not use your axles. He'll use his because he knows his are greased up, haven't been sitting for 5-10 years. He's responsible for his axles. Okay. And a lot of times you don't get your axles when you buy that mobile home and it's delivered. They send it back, and they recycle them over and over and over again. So I'm going to talk about next is what to do with the skirting if you have it. So you will not be able to, when you get to the other end, it's not likely that you're going to have the exact same high on one end, low on another, the exact same way. But you are going to need to know what the order is, because that would speed up things. Say if you had a high side over here and then you end up being over there, if it's in order. So what you can do is take a Sharpie on the back side of that skirting, say if it's vinyl, and mark the numbers on each one and stack them up. Actually, you can, with vinyl skirting, you can take the top front off, pull out one panel, lay it over, pull it out of the bottom rail, the channel there, pull it over a little bit, and just start rolling it up.
Davis Shopworks, have to say, just got in here, love the hat, glad YouTube gave me the ability to see you here again.
Glad to have you here, man.
Children's families here.
Hey, I'm glad to hear those guys are still here.
God bless you both, and you have your hands full of. You have no idea.
Oh. All right. So when you're rolling that skirting up, you can roll it up into a roll, and you can do it in sections, because that roll could end up being the size of a back of a pickup truck, and not something you want to try to pick up because it's the middle slides out. So you're gonna roll it up that way, and maybe you can use, if you go to the next site and you're lower, say you were pretty high up, say 4 foot high, to the 6 inches up on the side, on the skirting, on that siding there, maybe if you drop down just a little bit lower, and your mover, you can tell your mover that. If he doesn't do it, it's because he's totally stressed out, and all his guys are wore out from all the stress of the move, and he's just, man, I'm just happy to get here. Cross my fingers. It's unbelievably stressful. And I've been involved with a lot of secondaries. A lot of times movers would pick me up, and my crew, and I had 3 guys working for me, and they'd pay me $100 an hour, $150 an hour 20 years ago, just to help them get on site. Even though they had their own help, they knew that I had a lot of experience with moving, and I had a good eye for backing one in. So, uh, what I'm telling you is they may not feel like uh, cooperating as much. So that may mean that you can't lower it, or maybe you can find somebody that can lower it down a little bit lower. Now you got to be able to get underneath it and service it, but you can get pretty low and go right through the middle, and that would mean that most of your skirting might fit, and then you wouldn't have to buy very much if it was vinyl. Same with metal. You again would mark the back side of that metal and just stack it up, okay? And then don't stack too tall, because then it gets hard to move. Or you can stack it up tall but get ready to move smaller pieces, sections of it. So you're going to number those pieces and pull up your J channel on the bottom and stack all that stuff all neatly. And then we're going to talk about the decks. I'm assuming you're going to have at least one. So
Getting ready to strip my deck, what's the easiest and cheapest way to strip the old stain off? Thanks. That's the Childers family.
Stripping the deck. It depends on the age of the stain. And they we're talking about decks right now, moving them. You may have a hard time getting all the stain out. What you can do is go to a darker color. Even a different color, but it has to be darker. That's what you're looking at. Because that stain soaks into the wood, or at least it should. So we have a video out there using OxiClean and then scrubbing. You don't even use a power washer. Mind you, a power washer not a lot of times knocks out the soft part of the wood. So
how much does a mobile home weigh, like a double wide home or a single wide? How much do you think they weigh overall?
depends on the length, depends on the material on the outside and material on the inside. So they range anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 per half. 40,000 is a pretty heavy home. That's a masonite sided home most likely, and there's a reason why they have 3/8 drywall, because 3/8 is not cheaper to buy. It's lighter. It's more expensive to buy. I mean, they might be able to find a place to get it at the same price as 1/2 inch, but the reason they're trying to keep the weight down. So you're looking at a heavy house, and the kinetic energy of that house moving 30 miles an hour, it could take a long time to slow that house down. 30, 40,000 pounds. That's pretty heavy. So a double wide is going to be probably 60,000. I mean, I'd have to look up it to be sure, but I would say it's going to be a really heavy house. And you have the one side is heavier than the other, and you go, what? I did too. So the wet side, which is usually all on one side, that is bathrooms and kitchen, it will actually have generally one more axle. Instead of 4 axles, it'll have 5. Instead of 5 axles on one, it'll be 6. So that's your heavy half when you're moving a double wide. Single wides with metal siding are pretty light, and they pop and crinkle and do a lot of things going down the road. It's pretty amazing to see it go down the road like it does. So anyway, the decks, once you start getting bigger than 8 foot, you're going to start looking at how can I move this deck without actually tearing it all up. So you can't turn a deck 16 foot high straight up in the air. You could do a 10 on top of a trailer. You're going to be 12 foot high. You don't want to hit a 12 foot high bridge.
Is it hard to put a window in a small outdoor shed?
No. So what?
Childers family is
Oh.
asking.
No, I'm actually working on a 30 foot by 12 portable building that we turn into a house, and I need to do a catch-up video. She's not been able to release it quite yet, but the woman wanted me to raise the back 15 foot up so she could have a bedroom above the back. It would normally be a storage area. She'd throw things up there. That's her bedroom, and it's got now it had two small windows, and now it has 10 windows in it. So I added 8. Is it hard? No. Why? Because there's not as much weight on the roof coming down on the window. You can go ahead and if you want to put a 12-inch header above it, it's really going to be, your window's going to be pretty low because it's like 7 foot to the size of that portable building generally. So you don't need to, I promise you. It won't, there's not much weight up there. Okay, so yes, it's really pretty easy. If you're getting inspected, you may have to put in a header and all that stuff. I don't know how tough that county that you're dealing with is, but
how do you fix a storm door that is 1 inch short?
you can put a sweep on it. The bottom of it should have a adjustable sweep, a U-shaped with a rubber deal on the bottom of it. It should be able to slide down. If it doesn't have it, you can go to the hardware store and get it.
Eduardo Garcia.
Yeah, glad to have you, man. But there's a U-shaped piece that's supposed to go on the bottom, and it lets you adjust it to where you're sweeping, and it usually has the screws so that you can, if it's too low, you can bring it back up, or if it's too high, you can bring it back down. So it's U-shaped, and it has a rubber sweep on the bottom of it. So that would cover your 1 inch. You can also just do a regular sweep, which is a flat piece that has a rubber sweep on it. So, but generally on a storm door, you have a U-shape with the rubber piece on it. So on a deck, what I've had to do is either take the deck apart when we get ready to move this mobile home, or I have cut them in half and then 16 foot and do them like a teepee on my trailer.
Wide 20. I don't understand. Oh, never mind.
So 30 foot long deck on a gooseneck trailer. We went probably 80 miles and put it up on the other end, braced it all up underneath. It really didn't take very long, but you end up two 8-foot panels sticking up at an angle from the outside of the trailer, strap everything down, put the rails underneath, and then throw all the blocks and everything that was there involved. So you're going to have to think about what you want to do with your deck. Put it on a separate trailer most likely, or take it all apart and rebuild it the way a different shape maybe. So that is something you're going to have to think about. Now let's talk about utilities. The electricity quite often is frightening for a lot of people. Movers can get pretty bold. They know just turn the big breaker off and start cutting things. You can do that, but you can also just unbolt it from the inside. If you're really concerned about it, find somebody who has some electrical experience. It may actually be required in your county that you have to hire an electrician. Now you're talking about some money. And he'll pull the wire out of the panel by the pole, and he'll pull the wire out of the house. Whereas the mover, he'll turn the breaker off and just start cutting things.
So you want that done before he ever comes out.
You'd rather. Now, does it mean you can't fix it? Yeah, you can fix it. You use up things called kearneys. They take the two pieces together like that, and it slips through a U-bolt inside like so, both pieces, and then it has a nut on it, and a sort of like a split bolt and a nut on the bottom, and you put those two pieces in there with deox, as it's going to be aluminum, and you don't want it to oxidize, and you bolt it down, tighten it up till the two are touching just as hard as you pull it tight as you can. Then you wrap it up with rubber tape, and then cloth tape, and then plastic regular electrical tape. But those things range around $15 to $20 a piece. And you got 3 legs. Now you have to have 4 legs, and that 4-leg wire is $9 a foot. It's crazy high. I don't understand why it's so high.
Wow.
So
That's went up.
it's worth pulling up out of the ground or digging it up at $9 a foot. I mean, it might not be very deep. It might be in pipe. It might not. So the pipe is $3 a foot. So now we're talking about $12 a foot if it's in the ground 2 feet, 3 feet. 3 feet's pretty deep and hard to dig. So that's your electrical. Those are your choices. You can hire somebody to pull it through, or find a friend that knows a little more about electrical than maybe you do. You can look over your shoulder, because next time you can do it yourself. Turn the power
Hopefully
on.
you're not moving your house that often.
I mean, you can in a lifetime. You can make. I'm working on I've worked on mobile homes that are from the 50s. You can bet that thing
Just move.
is moved a bunch. I promise you. Matter of fact, back in the 50s, Lucille Ball was in a movie called The Long, Long, Long Trailer. And back then, you just hooked that mobile home onto your,
Truck or car.
well, they were station wagon. And you just pull that thing down the road. So, and you might go from one town to the next, trying to find a good job, and then you work out and you move on to the next one. But that's a Lucille Ball movie. And she was a beautiful woman for her time, especially early on.
Yeah, they actually had to do her makeup to make her not so pretty.
Well, yeah, she
They
was
had-
something
because
else.
She was a looker.
But she was in that movie called The Long, Long Trailer.
She did quite a few movies.
So
Random.
that was when she was very young. So those houses back then, you just pulled it into a real nice little mobile home park, but they weren't very big homes. They were 30 feet long, maybe 35 would be a big one. And so you moved a lot. Back then, you just had like a little aluminum steps you pulled up, and you had these aluminum piers that you screwed them up and then tightened up the nut on them and held them. And that was really cool because that was unusual. But nobody intended to stay there very long. Now we're talking about very, very big homes. There is an exception, the park model, but they're not particularly cheap. It's called a park model because actually, I believe you can move them down the road if you get the right permits and all that with a 1-ton truck.
Really?
Would I know? Because they're really wide. It really takes some skill to move them. But you can, as far as I know. I know a guy who did 2 mobile home parks that way. He turned them into park model mobile home park. All right, so back to what we're talking about. We talked about the electric. Guess what? You have sewer also. Now, the sewer in the ground, you're not going to want to take that with you. It's nearly $2.50 a lineal foot. You don't want to leave it behind if it's above the ground, okay? You want to be able to take that with you. You don't want to tear it all to pieces. You want to be able to maybe take it apart at the couplings. Sometimes they'll just come apart. Maybe you'll have to have 20 foot long or, on a 16-foot trailer and cut it and put couplings on it. But you want to be able, whenever you cut it loose from the home, you want to put it where you can put a coupling and put it back together. Don't cut it right next to a 90 or a T, and now you can't get anything on it. You're going to have to get rid of all that T and 90 to put something new to get it all tied together. And then there is the water supply. Again, you might have insulated water line, and then all the heat tape maybe, and all that water line is not terribly expensive, but why are you just throwing it away? You can save that also. Now you got to turn it off. You don't have to be a plumber to know how to do these things. on the sewer and the water. Just if you have any questions at all, you can go to a YouTube video, and I promise you it's pretty easy. So now we've talked about those three things. Those are most important. But guess what? You have the cable and the phone. So all those things, the internet maybe, all those things are involved.
Starlight.
Well, we have Starlink, so maybe you would, or Usenet. You're going to have to make that arrangement to have for them to install it. Maybe you can keep the original equipment. You should be able to when it comes to Starlink. All right, so what other things might be a problem? Anything that you bought decorative to put on the outside of the mobile home that is not really meant to be there, take it off and put it inside. Okay? And then when you get to that point, don't put tape on your cabinet doors, because the tape will pull that paper finish fake wood off. It will pull that finish off, okay? Even if you use that easy release blue or green tape, don't put tape on it, okay? You do want to try to figure out how to keep your cabinet doors from slinging around, you know. So what you do is you take rubber bands or zip ties and tie them from one knob to the other. So, okay, you're going to wrap it around. So, same with doors.
I might have come in late for this. Maybe it was answered, but on a double wide home, do they bolt the entire marriage line like through the middle on the floor, roof line, and the side walls as well to hold it?
So that's great. You're perfect. You're asking the right time. So on a double wide, they have lag bolts that go through the two halves to bring them together. And literally you can pull one up by the angle of the bolt. You can literally move it up. It's coordination, trying to get those. Usually you slide. What we used to use is the like a strap for the anchors.
He's got a second question.
And so, yes, you got to pull all those bolts loose. Sometimes people put spray foam in there. You got to cut that loose. You got to on the double wide, you got to pull the ridge row off, and then you got to wrap up those two halves. That means you got to run 2x6s. I recommend 2x6s, not 2x4s, to support the middle. Brace it up, okay? Where those two halves would have had a big old living room, maybe a big kitchen. You're going to have to brace them up so they can go down the road. Generally, your mover does that. And they wrap it up with plastic so rain don't get in. Say they get stuck before they get in there. That's part of it. That's part of what they do. The mover does those things. Should you do them? Probably not. Your mover should be doing that so he knows that. He can look at the house closer and see all the things he needs to see. So he's going to be crawling underneath there, putting the axles in. But yes, that is something that has to be done. And there's electrical connections and there's plumbing connections sometimes, mostly electric. And so now the final thing that I want to talk about is the AC.
He has a question before you go to that.
What's your question, man? We can stop any point.
And when they reset the home, do they decide the piers just off the old setup prior to the move, or do they have to look at the new area conditions to factor the piers in? I know the answer to that.
Okay, so the way it's supposed to be done is within 2 feet of the front or the end, you have to have a pier that's double blocked, not single blocked. And the blocks go across the frame. Frame's going this way. Okay, double blocked on all the four corners of each half if it's a double wide. Single wide, again, within 2 feet of each end. Okay, and then every 8 feet, no more than 8 feet, they have to have another pier. Okay, if that pier is over 3.5 blocks high, you end up having to be doubled up no matter what. That is counting the half pad or the pier pad that's on the bottom, which is 4 inches. Sometimes they use 2 half pads instead of one great big heavy pier pad. Then block, block, block If there's anything after 3.5, you have to double up. Okay? So no more than every 8 feet. And then you have to put a perimeter blocking underneath the doors, one on each side, not directly underneath the edges of the doors, but under the floor joist that's closest to the edge of the door.
I don't think his question was that detailed.
I know, but I'm going to give you this is all part of the move. So if you move to a house that's going to have the terrain really high out there, you want them to lower it high as low as you can get it, so that maybe you're really low on the back side, but you're not as high on the front side. And your mover's going to know that. So you don't want to demand, hey, I want to be higher back here, because if he does, he has to go higher in the front, which makes you more spindly, makes you almost always settles more on those tall sides. And it's after 6 blocks, you have to call. You're supposed to get an engineer. You know, you're starting to get where you need to tie the piers together and pour concrete, put in steel, because that's really high. When you're 7 blocks high, it's actually kind of scary. But finally, there's the straps. So what they're doing is 2 foot from each end, no more than every 8 foot. And then on the marriage walls, if you're a double wide, wherever that big wide opening is, there's walls on each end. Directly below that are supposed to be piers to support it, to carry that weight, which is carrying that beam that runs across. And a double wide has all that trim that has to be taken down. Your mover does that, or at least he should. He will have to move it. Somebody will. So you got to save all that trim to reuse it again. You put it back together, and those piers fall where they may. Okay, it's no more than 8 foot. It can be less than 8 foot. No more than 8 foot. Now, the anchors and the straps. Can you pull the old anchors out if they're screw-in anchors? Yes, you can. But can you do it very easily without the tool? No, you cannot. Drive anchors, the cross-drive anchors, you have a shot at that. You can take a pipe wrench and kind of put it at an angle, and then just start wiggling back and forth, and then pull it out, hopefully. Then you take those on. Again, your mover should be doing those things, otherwise you're going to have to purchase those on the other end. And if it's soft dirt on one end, you can put the screw-in anchors there, and you go to a bluff line or hard solid rock, like in limestone. You're not going to be able to use those same screw-in anchors. Or if it has runners, then the anchors will have to be planted on the outside edge, the width of that mobile home, underneath the edge. Not just out there to the edge, underneath the edge, so that whenever you put the skirting up, those are not sticking out. So, as far as I know, that's the basics. There's so much more detail that goes into it, but cross your fingers. Don't do things to increase your odds of failure, which is to leave your things inside the house that are heavy. If you want to leave a trampoline or something, they won't really care. But a whole bunch of books, a whole bunch of clothes, all your furniture, that would be a problem.
Adding piers help stop or slow down the process of having to re-level as often? You shouldn't have to re-level that often.
That sounds reasonable, but for whatever reason, if the ground is soft enough, it doesn't really matter if you you are displacing weight. Okay, the more piers you put in, the more you are placing less weight on each pier. So does that mean you won't settle? A concrete foundation home will settle.
And
promise you.
He added like every 6 feet. Would that be better than
Yes.
8 feet for longevity?
Some.
And then Eduardo is
Not a lot.
asking, double wide is cracking in the middle. Is that because it's sinking in the sides?
Yes.
How do you fix it?
Yes.
Re-level.
It's re-level time. Now, if a double wide cracks in the center, usually that's just, it could be just things are starting to give a little bit, and you can caulk that. But if you're talking about across the mobile home, that's a whole nother journey. I would like to talk to you about that. But they a long time ago stopped using screws to hold down most of the drywall. They use a spray foam, and whenever the heat gets on that spray foam through the roof and then the gap of insulation, that it gets to that spray foam, it starts deteriorating, and then you get these weird cracks that don't follow any particular rafter, if you want to call them rafters, and it does jagged big cracks. That's a
That would be just drywall finishing, wouldn't it?
you have to deal with that foam, and usually, I mean, I've seen them brand new when they get real hot, like this time of year, which is July, August. Bring in a new single wide, put it on the place, and there was no cracks in it, and then be cracks that run really weird, jagged, Z-shaped, and doesn't and just break. That would be the foam getting too hot that holds that drywall up there. So they put those things, those sections of the roof are put up particularly on double wide. They're put on the ground upside down, and then they're swung up there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I'd probably like to get a video at some point of a manufacturer of single wides and double wides, but they're spray foam it real quick. They lay those drywall pieces on there, and then they swing it up in sections. So
Okay.
I hope I'm helping you
Davis
with that. But
Shopworks on our Duardos, when you do go to re-level, what should be the point of reference you go off of for the rest of the beams? Have you found a better way to keep a constant reference point? Is he talking
well,
about water
you're talking
level?
about the water when you're using the water level, yeah. So I don't know if you've seen the videos where I use a water level. I actually have a video and shows you how to make one.
I'm
So
gonna break that out into a playlist too.
yeah, we're eventually breaking all the things that we're doing to show people how to do things into playlists where you can just watch those playlists. You don't have to spin through all the videos.
Yeah, but his editor has been lazy recently.
So you're asking me, you're going to determine, you don't necessarily want to go with the highest and then bring everything else up. You might want to pick something toward the middle, not the lowest, not the highest. Depends. So like if you go with the highest and your skirting is starting to buckle because it's down too much, you raise it up. If they had it leveled to begin with, and I say this with, I'm going to tell you, there's some movers, quite a few,
Do not.
they're not leveling the houses.
They're just
So whenever somebody sends me out there to re-level a house, I'm like, if I do that, your skirting is going to be short 4 inches over here. I just want you to know. I don't want you to be mad at me. What can we do about it? Well, we can lower it over here, but that's another journey in taking out blocks and just to try to save your skirting. And I end up having to cut off all the skirting over here because it never was right to begin with. Sometimes the re-level is determined by the lowest point already is too low. You don't want to go below underneath the frame. You don't want to be lower. The lowest I ever go is a half pad and some wood. You don't want steel on concrete. So a half pad and a 2x, that's not going to pass an inspection, but that will give me, if it's only one corner, that will give me a much lower end on the high side. So I have to choose. That's something you have to determine. Hey, do I want to make this whole house the low side and bring everything down to that, or do I go up? I try to go somewhere in the middle, but you're not tied to that. Mind you, there's one home that I worked on. The story goes, all the people come over to see me do the work, and the ladies also told me this story of the guy when he moved it in. Said he would do the leveling himself so he could probably save some money. Well, the mover was happy because he was happy to get it there. Well, he was drunk, and all the guys he had working with him were drunk. Okay? And they stayed drunk. So that house is nowhere near level. Okay? It's just, it never has been. And then they did all the perimeter blocking with blocks up to that non-level home. Then they put addition on it. Then they built a deck all the way across one side and down the ends.
Is that the one that you said there was only so much you could do?
I can do that, but we're going to end up cutting loose every deck and then changing every deck. It's going to be a long, drawn-out deal. So they, some of the blocks will have to be added to, and that will mean that the whole addition on one side would have to been raised up, change the roofing, change the plumbing, and then the whole deck on that other side, we say, well, maybe we could just go to the front deck because that's a lot of work to move that deck. Well, that deck wasn't level from one end to the other. The deck wasn't leveled to 12 feet across from one side of it to the other. None of it was level. So I gave her the idea, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to leave it because I'm not ready to spend that much money.
Have you guys made a video walking through like how to re-level yeah, we have
several
a whole we actually have a whole playlist that is just re-levels, and it's several different re-levels that him and the boys have done over the years.
Yeah,
and we keep adding to it.
Yeah, and and I want you to be very careful.
Yeah.
Of course, I know you are. When you're underneath the house, you don't want the thing to come down on you.
Somebody, let's see, I have had to re-level, but I can't say it was done totally right, and companies wanted $10K and up to do the job. Really?
Yeah, they charge.
10,000?
Yes, so
That's
you know
like a
now.
metal roof for us.
No, I don't even do a metal roof for 10,000.
No, that's like metal roof and
A deck,
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm proud of you for doing what you did. Can you go back and adjust it? Sure you can.
Yeah.
If you think you can do a little bit better, you got a better method, maybe use my method with the water levels, and now you know a little bit more. Sure you can. You can get it even closer. But should you have spent $10,000? No. I could re-level that house. Most houses I can re-level in less than a half a day, and that includes on my end loading up and then going out there for a couple hours and then driving back. And I don't charge but $700. Okay? And I think one time or two times somebody paid me to drive 4 hours and I did it for $1,000. And there's a 4 hour there and a 4 hour back, like Gilligan's Island.
Long day.
A 4 hour cruise. So yeah, they're gouging you. It's kind of a, it's such a specific skill. When you're doing that, you're really picking up a skill level that not many people know, and it's a serious responsibility.
And here's another thing. Anybody who wants to learn how to work with their hands, with the way everything's going, you can monetize that. If you can fix things, you can make money off of it.
And that's what I'm even if nobody was listening to what we've been putting out, let's say nobody wanted to.
He tried to be within a half an inch of the beams.
That's good.
He did it.
And
he's saying, let's see, we are doing the sheathing I talked to you about, but we did level before and got it close, we think.
Okay. Well, it probably feels like it inside. But even if nobody listened, I know that my boys can use what I have put out there. And they have. If they wanted to go out into the, take over and do things themselves. So my motives are to help other people, to make other people's lives better. As far as what we make, Google
don't even
cut how much they pay us by half.
More than half.
More than half.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that much to begin with, and it's not that much for sure now. So what my motives are is to help other people and not just go through my life not doing anything. That's why I'm not charging so much when I know I could charge much more to re-level. I had a lady want me to fly. She was going to pay me to go to Connecticut to re-level her house.
Buy the tools, fly them
Yeah.
in.
It still would have been cheaper than the $10,000 to re-level. So it's getting silly.
And we get approached all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I stay very busy anyway, and I have plenty of projects of my own. I don't have time to be a mechanic, so
I'm a hateful cow. I don't want my husband away from me.
she don't like me to be away. Believe it or not, I'm a pretty nice guy to be around.
How do you figure out how to charge for a job? I'm just starting. You know, that is a wonderful question, and that is one we need to actually do an entire video, if not a series of videos on.
On how to estimate a job.
How to estimate and how to charge on a job.
Uh,
And I don't know what job he's talking about. He says I'm just starting.
So- why don't we, how about we talk about that next time?
We'll do that next week. Go ahead if you have any additional questions, particular jobs.
Yeah, in particular
throw those
estimates.
in the comments, and I can write them down for him for next week.
And I'm here as a resource, not as a pain, not to be smart aleck. I'm here as a resource. It makes me feel good to help other people.
When we get the project done fixing the tornado damages, we will send a link for our video to you guys before we go public with it on our channel. But I will say, Phil, your input is a huge help. Thanks. Hey, go public. We don't care. We don't have to approve it, dude. I am just thrilled, it says he, that we can help you. To
Yes.
help you fix your stuff. That's amazing.
We wish you all the best. Both as the hard person that's
Series
getting out
of
there.
video. Okay, Maria wants us to do a series of videos on job estimates, building an entry deck, or changing out a bathtub in a mobile home.
I think we have a little bit of.
We've got some, but it's very few, and it's. I've been gonna approach you.
I'll tell you, I have a dry erase board back here.
I'll get him some markers, and we'll get him all set up where he can go. There.
So I will. I'll draw you. I'll show you how I come about. I just tested one of my estimates for doing drywall. How much drywall? And I'll tell you briefly. First of all, I checked it with my eye and like, okay, this is going to be 46 sheets. You know, because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and okay. And I know I'm going to have some waste, and I'm pretty good about not wasting much. I'm usually below 10%, which is exceptionally good. So I was like, I'm going to double check my old figure. So the old figure I would use to estimate a house is you take the floor square footage and you multiply it times 3. And then if you're going to do 8-foot sheets, it's a 4x8, so it'd be 32 square feet, or a 4x12, which would be 48 square feet. So you take your square footage times 3 square footage of your floor times 3, and then divide by whatever size sheet, which is 32 or 48, and that will tell you how many sheets you got. It's really close.
Davis Shopworks says awesome, will do, and like I told Bill on the phone, I give credit where it is due, and we both agree passing the knowledge is the right thing to do. Encourage others to get more confidence in DIY. Yeah, he even lets me play with power tools, which is kind of frightening.
Yeah. Honestly, as times get harder and harder, which I think personally we're in a massive recession
No,
and probably a depression. We should be helping one another because the government's not going to do very much. They're trying to get bigger and we're trying to survive. Okay, they need more and more of our money so they can send it to other countries. We need to try to figure out ways to help one another. And I think the government is necessary probably to overlook things. I mean, to look things over. But we need to help one another, because I don't see government showing us how to re-level our home, or to fix a door or a window. We'd be asking the government to do too much. Why don't we just be kind to one another and share the knowledge that we have with one another? And if Google doesn't want to pay us for it, what do we care? We're helping one another. That's what our motives should be, to do what is better for one another. And I wish you guys all the best. And please let me know what I can talk about for you guys. I'm just trying to let you have the information that I've experienced, and I still learn every time I turn around. When I stop learning, I'm going to be dead. When I stop making mistakes, I'm going to be dead too, but I learn more than I actually make mistakes. So I wish you guys all the best, and I want you to be happy, and remember that we can be happy if we just choose to be. You're American, not Americant. See you guys.